2020 wasn't exactly the best year in recent memory, what with Australia burning to a crisp, the threat of global nuclear war, and the small issue of a global pandemic on top of it all. With most of the world stuck inside during repeated lockdowns, it was at least fortunate that we had a pretty huge year in gaming to keep us all busy. A lot of PlayStation exclusives made their way to PC this year, and I spent a ton of hours on the likes of Red Dead Redemption 2, Death Stranding, Horizon Zero Dawn, and the Quantic Gaming trilogy of Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit Become Human. I love those story-based games, so it was great to see them finally come to PC. We also had the Master Chief Collection come to Steam, which brought 6 Halo games to PC for the first time, and they also announced recently that the entire Yakuza series is coming to PC over 2021. But that's enough about older games. Let's see my top 10 games that were released during 2020. The remake of Resident Evil 2 back in 2019 was a huge success. It was one of my favourite games last year, and it seemed Capcom being a little bit more keen on revamping some of their older titles, and 2020 had Resident Evil 3 next in line. With some of the most impressive looking graphics I've seen from gaming so far, the game follows Jill Valentine with a new look, and it's during the events of destruction of Raccoon City. Now, while Resident Evil 2 had Mr. X, Resident Evil 3 features one of the most iconic enemies of the series, Nemesis. He's one of the big tyrant enemies, and he's relentlessly chasing throughout the entire story. The game does lack the multiple choice scenarios from the original, where you were able to choose how to approach each fight when you came up against Nemesis. So instead they've added cutscenes with quick time events, and it makes it one of the most fast-paced and action-intensive Resident Evil titles. You don't really have that much time to think or stop. There is always that pressing urgency of Nemesis being right behind you, and it was one of the best action games of the year. 2019 had a ton of Souls-likes that tried to evolve and adapt the formula that made the original Dark Souls so popular. Games like Remnant and Code Vein, but Nioh 2 does the opposite. It takes its original game, slaps a bit of polish on it, and gives you even more punishment. The combat system is the same as before, with similar techniques and weapons that have newly designed skill trees and upgrades, allowing a lot of different types of builds. You can carry 2 weapons at a time, switching between them and different stances in order to build your ki, which is essentially your stamina, in order to try to beat the enemies. You can design your own character this time around, and the protagonist has the ability to change into a yokai form, the yokai being the demons that you fight during the game. And using new sorts of moves, you can unlock using soul cores. These moves allow you to change into a yokai for a split second and perform a powerful move, or you can turn into a strong move like the living weapon from the first game. And you get these soul cores from defeating the toughest enemies. And the enemies are exactly that, they're tough. This is probably the most punishing game of the year, with each enemy providing a serious threat, and new types of yokai enemies that combine ranged and melee attacks to keep you on your toes. I've heard of gamers uninstalling before they reach the first boss, so if you want a game that's going to kick your ass repeatedly but make you feel like a badass when you succeed, Nioh 2 is the answer. The sequel to The Blind Forest continues the story of Ori and his friends in a new world that is as vast, mesmerizing, and filled with secrets as the last one. This world spans multiple different biomes, all hiding upgrades and abilities that make you stronger, and you can meet up with huge allies as you make your way through the game, like this giant frog for example. Something the series has always done better than other Metroidvanias is the movement. It's just so seamlessly fluid as Ori flies through the air, double jumping, wall jumping, and using a variety of environmental apparatus and tech to navigate the mazes across the map. The combat's also evolved since the last game, so it's not just about the movement. You can choose between melee, ranged, and other magical abilities to try and deal damage, and finding upgrades increases your arsenal and chances against the number of bosses throughout the game. Each one of these battles is a massive spectacle, with chase scenes and stealth sections preluding the set pieces that are the main event. Visually, the game is gorgeous. The music and the story make this an emotional rollercoaster and another great entry to the series. What happens when you cross Doom, Crypt of the Necrodancer, and Binding of Isaac? Bullets per minute. BPM is a first-person roguelike that requires you to do all of your actions in time to the music, so shooting, reloading and dodging, while fighting swarms of enemies in each room. Clearing rooms give you upgrades or new weapons, new abilities that allow you to improve your character during your run. What upgrades you choose to buy in each shop and which abilities you decide on make a build that shapes each playthrough to be slightly different. Each zone has its own visual style, which is very unique for this game, and each zone has 2 levels with a boss at the end. Beating the game for the first time unlocks more characters. You start off with the 1 with 4 more opening up, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. The toughest, for example, on the base game is Oda, and he gains the ability to fly, but he will die in a single hit. The game is not easy by any means, with a normal and a hard mode, and a recent update added another difficulty, Hellish, and some even harder characters, but it's one of the most unique takes on a genre I've seen for a long time, and one of my highlights and surprises of the year. If you ever played Mirror's Edge and wished it had more swords and robots, well, here's your answer. Ghostrunner is set in a cyberpunk-esque future where you play as an android fighting their way through hordes of enemies in order to find the truth about themselves and the people messaging them. It's mainly a first-person platformer. You can wall run and jump your way through the levels, you can slow down time to dodge bullets while you're floating in midair, and there's a lot of different enemies that you'll face, not only ones with guns. One hit from your sword or another projectile and they will die. That sounds pretty easy, right? Well, you will also die in one shot as well, meaning you'll be dying and repeating levels over and over and over again until you get the right pathway, much like a game like Hotline Miami or Katana Zero. The game isn't easy by any stretch, and some of the bosses are extremely challenging. Remember, you die in one hit. It requires you to use every last bit of the new abilities you'll discover in the very cyberspace type puzzle levels that break up in between the combat sections. The music is amazing and it fits perfectly for the game. It pumps you up so much that despite failing over and over again, you'll keep going until you work out the perfect way to get through a stage. It's hard to say what makes Animal Crossing appealing to play. There really isn't a main objective, you just play. New Horizons takes place on a tropical island that you can fill with villagers, sculpt how you want it, upgrade with paths, buildings. The game seems a bit more like work when you describe it. You have to pay off your debts, pay off your loans, but the ultimate chill nature of the game makes it such a relaxing ride that you look at the time and 5 hours has passed and all you've done is browse the museum to see which things you're missing from your collection. As with all Nintendo games, the online connectivity is iffy at best, but for me it's more of a humbling experience. Here I was thinking my twin Godzilla statues was enough to make my island look cool before I saw the insane creations people have come up with, fine-tuning their island to their exact specifications. Animal Crossing is a game that basically is what you make of it. With continuing updates, you can easily plunge many more hours in the coming year. Back in 2016, Doom was one of the biggest releases of the year, and the hype for Eternal has been massive. People are so excited for a continuation of the story. After a year delay, I have to say, it was well worth the wait. Doom Eternal carries on from Doomslayer's last adventure, with big arenas, fighting hordes of demons and crazy bosses, and even more glory kills for the most gruesome experience possible. This isn't just more of the same, however. There's a bunch of additions such as the hookshot on the super shotgun, the Crucible, which is Doomslayer's large energy sword that slices demons in half, as well as more enemies returning to the series from previous games that weren't in Doom 2016, such as the Pain Elemental and the Archvile. Eternal adds much more in terms of the story as well, fleshing out the Doomslayer's history. You learn a lot more about his backstory and how the games link together. And it provides a hub area that displays weapons and the various collectibles and soundtracks you can collect as you play through the game in the hidden sections. A lot of people that I spoke to weren't a fan of the extra platforming in the game. You can jump around in between the stages in order to progress to the next area. And the backtracking for keys and opening doors is a throwback to the older 90s Doom games, but for me it all added variation to the game and it was a non-stop ride from start to finish. Doom Eternal was actually a longer game than Doom 2016 too, and with one DLC already out and a second planned for 2021, there is plenty of content to play through. I mean, it has Keanu Reeves in it, so come on. Alright, so the launch of Cyberpunk was met with some not so rave reviews and disappointment from large portions of gamers who played it. I even made a video specifically on how buggy the game was, as have many other content creators out there. I was fortunate enough to be playing on brand new hardware, very up to date stuff, so my bugs and performance issues were pretty few and far between. Other people weren't as lucky, unfortunately. But if we ignore those issues for a moment and focus on the game itself, overall, Cyberpunk, it was a great experience. I mean, the animations and the visuals of the game on high-end machines is absolutely phenomenal. Honestly, I couldn't get over how detailed each character was just chatting to them during a conversation. The stories of the main characters are brilliant, and are a testament to CDPR's storytelling, something that we've seen that they can do during the Witcher games. And these were the most fascinating parts of the games, the stories. Okay, the combat did have variety, you could build up a character how you'd like, the character creation screen was so in-depth, there are many different things you could change. And in terms of actually skill-wise, you could focus on sniper rifles or pistols, or you could focus on being a stealthy sneak build, or only using swords and other melees, or focus on hacking, and there's so many different things, the list goes on. The abundance of side missions and random quests didn't have as much intrigue as, say, the Witcher series, probably due to the setting, but the main core of the game was so fun and the different endings were varied enough that I gave it a couple of playthroughs before I was done. A game worth waiting for the bugs to be patched out, that's for sure, but honestly, still one of the best games of the year. Before I start, I just want to say this game is the reason this video is so delayed. I just couldn't get enough. It's probably the best roguelike I've ever played, and it's not enough to define Hades by its genre, as it is so much more. You're playing as Zagreus, who's the son of Hades, as he tries to escape the underworld, and as you do that, you're offered various boons by the Olympians to bolster your arsenal in your prison break attempt. There are 4 areas you need to battle through, choosing your pathway and the different upgrades you can get on the way there, each with a boss at the end, before you reach the final boss. But it's going to take you a while to get there. This game isn't easy by any means. The game transcends all other roguelites, however, by adding an actual detailed story. There's amazing artwork of all of the Olympians and the other Greek gods, fully voiced dialogue that after over 90 hours I was still finding new conversations, and there is a wealth of upgrades. You can collect various currency through your runs that allows you to make yourself stronger in a variety of ways, giving yourselves extra lives, gives us more health, more damage. You can also unlock new weapons. There are up to 6 that you can choose from, and each of those has 4 different styles, making each playthrough very unique, as well as ordering for new areas in the levels to be given special healing or rest areas to give you a better chance going through. As you get better at the game and your upgrades start to make you feel overpowered, you can choose to make the game more difficult with better rewards, and there's abundance of nerfs and handicaps to make each run a challenge again. This is just glossing the surface of everything that Hades has to offer, as once you start digging, you'll uncover more and more things to do. Much like Hollow Knight did with Metroidvanias a few years ago, Hades has reached the pinnacle of its genre, and now it's up to other developers to catch up. Maybe it's because of nostalgia, maybe it's because virtual reality gaming is still a pretty recent concept for me, maybe it's because it's been over 15 years since we've had a main Half-Life game, who knows? All I know is that my first playthrough of HalfLife Alyx absolutely blew my mind, and it was my favourite game of the year. In terms of virtual reality, the game has reached the peak of games utilising it so far. More detailed, more interactive, more immersive than any other game I've played using a headset so far. You play as Alyx before the events of Half-Life 2 as you fight head grabs and combine alike through familiar territory in the Half-Life universe. The combat is fluid and simple, and while it only offers 3 weapons, a pistol, a shotgun, and an SMG, it somehow has more variety and fluidity than a game like Boneworks, which offers a much larger arsenal. Strap a grenade to the front of your shotgun to turn it into a makeshift grenade launcher, or catch enemy grenades and throw them back. Throw objects to distract, or just straight up bludgeon enemies with whatever is to hand. Upgrading your guns to have laser sights or extra magazines visually changes the way that they look. There's also a variety of puzzles and areas that require brain over brawn to progress, or sneaking through while physically covering your mouth to not alert enemies with your breathing. I want to hold back so I don't spoil it for those of you who haven't played the game yet, but it has some of the most terrifying, exciting, mesmerizing, and straight up insane sections that I felt like I just had to put it at number 1. Valve raised the bar in terms of virtual reality games with HalfLife Alyx, and honestly, I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. So those were my top games from 2020. What did you think? Are there any you disagree with? Anything you felt I missed out on? Just let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching everyone, take care, and I'll see you next time.